We talk a lot about results, KPIs, ROI, performance metrics, all those shiny markers of success. But here's a thought, listeners. What if leadership isn't really about results at all? I know that sounds almost blasphemous in the business world. But when you strip it down, the best leaders aren't chasing numbers, they are cultivating people. They are building environments where humans can actually thrive, not just survive. And when that happens, guess what? The results take care of themselves. Today, on this episode of the BizBlend podcast with your host Sana, we are diving headfirst into that idea with someone who doesn't just talk leadership, she lives it. My guest, Maren Perry, founder and CEO of Arden Coaching, is a leadership development firm that has been transforming organizations from the inside out for nearly 2 decades. Now, listeners, Maren's the kind of voice you want in your head when you are tired of corporate jargon and you are ready to hear what actually works, what actually matters. So, let's all challenge the myth together. If leadership isn't about results, what is it really about? Let's find out. And Maren, welcome to the show, and it's really an honor to have you here with us.
Oh, Sana, thank you so much for the kind introduction. That was beautiful. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maren. I'm absolutely looking forward to this conversation because it's going to challenge a lot of misconceptions or thought process or the already traditional, thought process or belief systems in this, especially when it comes to leadership. Numbers. So let's
No.
So let's start with the contradiction itself, Maren. People over results. Now, most leaders are wired to deliver. In fact, I also think that, if I'm given the leadership position, the very first by default expectation will be output, numbers, results, to hit goals, meet deadlines, grow revenue. So when you say leadership isn't about results, it sounds risky. How do we bring that to an executive who's laser focused on numbers?
I so appreciate you saying that it sounds risky. I think that is the experience that most people have when they hear me say this. But let me be clear from the start. You must produce results, right? You don't have a company if you don't produce results. If you're the leader of an organization, you must produce results. What I'm saying is that your leadership has to be focused in a slightly different way in order to produce those results. Results are important, but that's not your job as a leader with your people, right? If you are measuring results, great. You need a scorecard, 100%. I'm just suggesting that they're not the way for leaders to focus with their teams. That if you are communicating only about the results, it is not motivating to your team. You actually won't produce the best results if that's how you communicate to your team.
Absolutely agree, man. Absolutely agree. And I'm vouching for this on behalf of, because I have had that experience of working under leaders, managers on both the ends of the coin. Someone who is really focused on just the numbers. I mean, their approach is completely focused on only the output. And then a leader, a manager who is working on nurturing, mentoring, guiding. And of course, I mean, it begins with, this goal of getting the output, because at the end of the day, it's about the output. I mean, as you very well said. But then how exactly different the approach is. And I have felt the difference in there in terms of how I perceive it, how I feel about it, and the kind of dedication and sincerity that I have put into my work in order to get the results. I vouch for that.
Yes, I think it's the equivalent of, an athlete's performance. You measure an athlete's performance by the result, right? How far they can jump or how high they go or how fast they go. But if all you tell them is jump farther, right? If that's your coaching, go faster, jump farther, go higher. It doesn't actually help them produce anything different. So yes, that's your objective. You want them to jump farther, go faster, etc. But the way that you get there is by coaching them, right? Have them lift heavier weights, run farther distances, shift their stance or their position. Those are the things that you have to work on. The measure of your effectiveness is measuring the result. But if you're communicating to the athlete, just saying jump farther doesn't help, right? That's the equivalent of saying sell more, right? Our number is more. We must sell more. We must do more, produce more. The number is higher, etc. It's focused on the wrong thing for your people, right? It doesn't mean it's the wrong thing for the company. Absolutely need results, right? We've both said this. But in terms of your job as a leader of humans, it is not the most effective way to get what you actually want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Maren, and also if you can support it with, any kind of, like example or case study that you have observed or you have done, with the people you have worked. Like what happens when leaders do shift to focusing on people first?
Yeah, so we have a client who went through a major reorganization last year, and they admittedly did not do a great job of communicating the why of that reorganization to their people. Huge organization, and they didn't do a great job communicating the why. So the end result was that the frontline staff had confusion. They didn't know who they reported to or why the reorg or what was changing. And they also just felt like, oh, this just must be for the company to make more money or the leaders to make more money. I don't really get it or understand, right? Now, the reorg was actually important to continue to have the company be successful and be able to provide for its people. Like, there were great reasons behind it, but it wasn't communicated in a way that it mattered to the frontline teams. So, in the places where individual leaders, and it's a large organization, so this wasn't done throughout the whole organization, but in smaller pockets where the leaders were able to communicate to their teams what was in it for them and why the reorg would matter to them, be better for them, improve something for them, those teams felt engaged, right? They were not resistant. They were not pushing back. They were not rolling their eyes. They were actually actively engaged in trying to find new solutions. And it's normal for there to be a change curve, right? You've seen like an organizational change curve where there's confusion and then it gets worse for a while before it gets better. Well, those teams where that was communicated more clearly were able to move through that cycle more quickly and be able to focus on, okay, so this is new and it's not exactly as it was, and I'm not quite sure who to go to, but I'm going to try these several things. They were able to move through that process more quickly and more productively and produce better results for their group than elsewhere in the organization. So I think it's a good example of the downside of, focusing on just the results. We're doing X, here's the reorg, right? Because it's going to produce greater revenue, et cetera. But communicating the why gets people motivated and helps them understand rather than set it up as an us against them, right? That's what happened elsewhere in the organization. They want this. They are doing it to make more money. Now suddenly I'm in an organization where I'm against another part of my own organization. That's not helpful to the leaders, right? That's not what the leaders want. They don't want people thinking of an us-them population. So the communication of the why and engaging people really became the leaders' foremost job. That was their primary responsibility at that point.
Yeah. And I'm sharing the word communication. I'll come to that, but before that, I think this example, very crystal clear, is such a good example, that the human side is definitely the driver. It is not the distraction. And I think this is a kind of a very good answer to, let's say if a CFO or a CEO is listening to this conversation, they would say, okay, yeah, fine, but empathy won't fix my quarterly results or my targets or my profits. I think this is such a clear cut example that human side, it is a driver. It is not going to distract you away from the results.
Yeah, I love that phrase, a driver, not a distraction. I think the trap that some leaders fall into is feeling like, oh, we can delegate that to HR, right? That's a human resources issue. Like, they'll deal with the people side. My fundamental belief is that people are your strategic advantage because companies are comprised of human beings. And fundamentally, human beings are having a human experience. So you have to solve for their human needs first if you want to go far and go fast and go productively and have them contribute in an innovative and creative way, right? Otherwise, you very much should hire AI, computers, robots, something else. But people, which most organizations fundamentally rely on, even though they have automated processes for some component, right? Fundamentally, there are human beings involved in almost all businesses. And so you need to solve for their humanity to get the most productivity out of them.
Absolutely. And I'll support this, especially the this AI and the human aspect, because we are talking about especially the bottom line, so-called bottom line of being affected, the tasks which are repetitive or which do not require humans to be there. There was a specific instance, where with a very specific software, we were experiencing problem. And, of course, the first layer is where the AI bot comes into the picture. This is your problem. Okay, these are the steps to read through. But the problem which we had, that wasn't very specifically addressed by AI bot, and it had to be addressed by a human. So we got a specific person assigned to that issue. It got escalated with defined SLAs, and the kind of conversation that we had with that particular person from the software company, that actually made us trusted that yes, this problem is going to get solved. It took around 10 days. However, I think that particular human connection, it made us kind of reinstate that trust that yes, if this problem has come, it will definitely get solved, because there is a person from the company who is dedicatedly working on solving that problem. That is something I felt that, it's not going to be taken away by AI.
And what would your experience have been if it was an automated response? Don't worry, we're on it, we're taking care of it, it will be fixed. If that was a clearly IT response and not a human, where you feel like, oh, I trust that this person is going to own it and they're going to take care of it. Would you have felt differently if it was like an automated bot response?
I would assume it never going to be get solved. It's a intended ticketing system, escalated, and that's it. I had to go and follow up with them. Okay, what is this? What is the SLA? What is the status? Why isn't it getting solved? It kind of would have broken our trust in that particular company's customer service. And that is such an important aspect, because, your entire business, it starts with customer obsession, customer service. And as a continuous loyal customer, if that would have been tackled by AI, I think personally, and this is my personal belief, that it would have hit my trust with that particular product or the company.
Yes. I am of the firm belief that humans matter and our human experience matters. Now, I like productivity as much as the next person, right? I want our clients' companies to be incredibly productive, incredibly uh, revenue generating, successful, beyond their wildest dreams, right? I just believe that the way that you get there is by enlisting the human experience in a different way, because motivated human beings are creative and come up with innovative solutions and work in a way that is engaged with their other fellow employees and their colleagues. They talk and share in a way that is coming up with new solutions for your company, solving problems, improving processes, creating lean processes and systems so that the company is more effective. And at least the AI that most of us are using in most companies, it's not quite there, right? It's not quite there. It will give you the most common answer that has been culled from more data than you could possibly imagine, but it will not come up with an innovative answer. And so we need to fundamentally serve the human beings in our companies and not coddle them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about addressing their human needs, right? The need to know why, the need to understand, the need to be seen and heard, just basic things, right? People who are treated that way give back far more to their organization than the organization could ever ask for otherwise.
Totally. Totally. And that's a very, very listeners, I would say that's the first takeaway, key takeaway for all of you. And let's get to the training side, Maren, because you work with CHROs as well. Like you have worked with massive organizations for years. So what's the one element, every effective leadership program needs to actually stick? And even before that, like, why do you think like these many leadership developmental programs, they fail to create that lasting change?
Oh gosh, how much time do you have? I think that most programs fail because they are some version of one and done, right? People think, oh, I'm going to do a workshop on negotiation skills, and then everyone will be better at it. It's just unrealistic. Human beings don't learn that way. We learn something by repetition, through practice, through doing, and through failing and trying again. I have a couple kids, and I will say they don't get anything right the first time, right? It's not like you put a pen in their hand and they're able to write entire sentences, right? You learn gradually. We still do that as adults, and we have bad habits. We have habits that we've had for decades. And then someone puts us in a class and expects us to, not only absorb information, but also be able to apply it, unwind all of our bad habits, apply the new habits, and to do that somehow instantly. It's unrealistic and it doesn't work. And so then people have invested in a leadership program. They've done this workshop. It doesn't move the needle long term. And they say, oh, well, that doesn't work. No, that version of it doesn't work because you didn't do it the way humans actually learn, which is over time and being coached. So yes, you have to have the workshop on negotiation skills or having difficult conversations or whatever the topic is, but then you have to integrate it into their actual work. And you need the supervisors to understand it so they can help them apply it and coach them on it and give them feedback. So, our programs exist over a period of time, but you can apply a lot of it inside the organization as well. Repetitive learning. That is how human beings, and especially adults who have all these bad habits, right? We all have things to unwind first. We need many times at bat and many tries and correction and feedback and trying again. And I think most leadership programs don't account for that, and most organizations don't invest in more smaller touches as opposed to a one and done big solution.
No, I absolutely agree. That is a very very interesting point you have made, Maren. And like, if this is the challenge here, then what's that one element every effective leadership program needs to actually stick? Is it like, more of an executional approach or a practical approach, or something very specific that they need to incorporate into their leadership development programs?
The most basic way I can say it is more touches, right? So our programs integrate coaching and practical application and having people apply the learning in their job for that person with those particular bad habits to unwind and learning new habits. So it's more customized, but even at a massive scale, you can provide more touches rather than one. So if I had to give generic advice to all organizations, that would be it. More touches for your leadership development. Now, that doesn't have to be an investment, right? That can be about creating a coaching culture focused on learning, focused on feedback, focused on iterations. And that's about who you hire as your leaders and how you develop your leaders so that you create that coaching culture and people who are interested in learning and in trying and failing and learning more. If you have that continuous improvement mindset for the entire organization, you're going to get more out of any program that you invest in for your people, right? Anything you do internally, anything you hire externally, you will get more out of it if the culture is such that people are willing to try and fail and try again. Because if I am only based in results, right, to go back to our initial conversation, if I'm only focused on the results and it's only about that performance, I don't have the freedom to try something that, okay, it may not get that result this time, but next time it's 3x, 10x, right? But if I'm not focused on the learning, I can never get there. So that coaching culture is something that any organization can work to achieving. It's not a magic wand. It doesn't happen overnight, but that would be the ideal environment into which a leadership development program can actually get more traction.
Exactly. That absolutely makes sense, man. It absolutely makes sense. And I really love that you're talking about practicality here, because as you perfectly summed up, like, often leadership training, it feels like, just an HR checkbox, like not a cultural shift. And especially for, executives who are becoming new leaders, or individual contributors who are becoming people managers, it can really feel like a very messy or a difficult terrain to. It can be very, very overwhelming.
I think that's why it's important for the leaders to always be looking at their own skill set, yes, but also mindset. And for the leaders to be continually growing and developing themselves. Because if they are not, then they risk the "I'll let HR handle it" phenomenon, right? Where they just hand it off. If our leaders are not continually developing themselves, then they don't have the skill set themselves to recognize the importance of all the things we just talked about: coaching culture, many touches for leadership development. And it risks getting delegated and put in a box, right? HR will take care of that. That'll develop our people, and then we'll get better results. Well, it can't just be delegated that way, right? All the things we've talked about are about how it is integrated into the culture itself. Starts with the leaders, right? If they are not vulnerable with a continual learning mindset, their people won't be either, right? We know, just again, back to kids, right? Not that my colleagues are like kids, but you can see it really clearly in kids. If we just say, that's wrong, right? That is not helping them. Well, we're still humans. As adults, we learn in a similar way. So we want to think of setting the example. If I say one thing to my kids and do another, you can bet they watch what I do, not what I say.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. And I mean, I totally support that because I've come to realize this that through so many conversations that there are so many parallels between leadership and parenting. And from here, one particular aspect that comes to my mind is Maren, the communication. What we are saying, how we are putting it up, even putting forward the why behind any sudden change or shift in the organization, or let's say if it's a reorg, or it's a change in the metrics or the way of working, or any leadership change as well. So what's your thought on this? Like, how important is communication, that too in this age, where we have so many avenues, instruments out there to help us communicate, frame the words, either like in written or verbally.
Yeah. Communication is the way we connect with another human being. Written, verbal, spatial, right? All those different forms of communication. It's how we connect. It's how we communicate our experience, motivate someone else, get them, on our side, influence them to make a decision that we want. Communication is everything. And, you made a point about information. We have all the information we could possibly need, right? You have it in your pocket on your phone every day. You have the world's information at your fingertips, quite literally. Information doesn't make the difference. It is the application of the learning. It is the communication. Just because I have every bit of research that's ever been done in my pocket doesn't mean that I can motivate someone, doesn't mean that I can change how they think. The information itself doesn't make a difference. We still have to communicate it in a compelling way. We have to move people with our words, our actions, how we are with them. And, you won't convince me personally that a bot congratulating someone, no matter how active and accurate the avatar or the voice, that getting acknowledged by a bot, I don't think is the same thing as getting acknowledged by a human being, because you fundamentally understand that the human being has agency and is able to look you in the eye, and you get a different, again, human experience, even if it's the same words as said by a bot. The experience of hearing it from a human being who looks at you and says, thank you, is different. And so the communication is everything.
Yep. And before we wrap up, man, I think this is also a very important point to talk about. And so it's a bit of a contradictory. Like, we have explored, not maybe entirely because of the time constraint, but I think this is such a strong case for focusing on people. But could the reverse also be true? Like, can achieving strong results first actually earn the trust and buy-in of your team?
Great question. Everyone likes to be on a winning team, right? Everyone wants to be on a winning team. Results can drive it, but you're going to have different personalities on your team. There are people who will be motivated by the numbers. There are people who will be motivated by the connection. There'll be people who will be motivated by the innovation. You have to know your audience. I think that's a component of it. But I think even you think a lot of leaders are motivated by the results, right? They want the company to win. They want the revenue numbers, whatever it is that they're kind of mentally measuring. But the question is why? Why do they care about that? Is it a scoreboard and it makes them feel accomplished? Do they really believe in the mission of the company, and so therefore that scoreboard matters because it's how many people you've impacted or how many people you've helped, or what is it that's driving them? Same thing throughout the organization. All of their employees have those potential drivers as well. So I think you need to assess the the way people are motivated. And I think you're right. For some people, the numbers, you can't show me a salesperson who doesn't want to go by the numbers, right? They thrive on the numbers. They love the numbers. They want to achieve the numbers. So I think knowing your audience is key. And yeah, everyone wants to be on a winning team. So it's helpful to have those results, and it can be very motivating. But I think it's because of what's underneath. What do the numbers mean to people? And you have to figure that out in order to communicate it effectively to different audiences.
No. I think it's a key differentiator. It's a very key differentiator. I mean, we can have people focusing on just the numbers, but I think also this differentiator kind of create cultures, where you actually create new leaders as well, because they go ahead and they kind of, nurture and take that legacy from you, and they take it forward from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, different people are driven by different things. And so that legacy piece can be a fundamental driver for some leaders, right? And so they are naturally prone to developing people behind them. It's not true for everybody. And so I think this does fall often on HR or the talent development departments to be looking at succession planning and to be looking at, if the leader or leaders aren't naturally kind of developing that bench, how will you as a company create systems that develop that bench? Because, that succession planning is what keeps a lot of people up at night. Who's next? Who's next? And if anything happens to this leader or that person who's next, who's behind that? That is a stressor, certainly.
It is. Super. So, Maren, before we conclude this very, very insightful, very important conversation, listeners, if they would like to connect with you and if they would like to get access to your resources, and also, share their thoughts and opinions about this conversation with you, what the best meeting?
Yes, absolutely. So Arden Coaching is my company, ARDEN Coaching. So ardencoaching.com, you can certainly reach us there. There are many resources. In fact, if you contact us and mention BizBlend, we're happy to send you a complimentary assessment to determine some of your organizational leadership development needs. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, which is at Arden Coaching.
Super. Yeah, listeners, what I'll do for all of you is I'll mention all the details in the show notes. So just do go check out Arden Coaching, connect with Maren. And before we conclude, I think leadership is one of those things that, sounds simple on paper, but it can get messy in practice. Because we are messy, listeners. Maybe that's the whole point. Leadership isn't about cleaning up the chaos. It is about showing up in it. So, Maren, thank you so much. This was such an energetic, very, very, very illuminating conversation, because you cut through the fluff and you have really reminded us that leadership isn't found in the metrics. It is found in the moments.
Oh, Sana, thank you so much. This is a great conversation. We could talk for hours. So, thank you for your time. It's lovely.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maren. And thank you to all the listeners for devoting your time to listen to this episode on BizBlend. And I'll, just leave you with this one question that you can ask yourself. Am I chasing outcomes or am I cultivating humans? Because the future of leadership depends on how you answer it. Until then, this is your host, Sana, signing off. See you soon. Thank you.